Most people think that the parables in the Bible are all about telling stories so that it would be super duper understandable for the people who were listening. But while that's a little true, it's not true 100% of the time. And in fact, sometimes the exact opposite is true. So if you've never thought about that or wondered about this question of why do parables exist in the Bible, that's what we are going to talk about in this episode of Story World. So this is the Story World Podcast. I'm Steve. This is my boy Al. What's up, Al?
I am excited to be here, Steve, and such an
Me
incredible
too.
introduction. It makes me want to go re-listen to all 7 or 8 episodes that we've put out about this, just so I can learn what
Yes.
we've already taught ourselves.
And so, yes, if this is the first time that you have the distinct pleasure of checking out the Story World podcast, go back a few episodes. We've been doing this series on the parables from the Bible, and it's been pretty legit. And this one wraps it up. We're finally on our last episode of the parables. It feels like the end of an era.
And if you've stuck with us this whole way through, this was a long. I think the series, even though we intended it to be 7 or 8 episodes, felt longer probably than
Yeah.
what we even thought it would be. But I think it was a really good one to tackle. And yeah, I'm excited to close it out tonight and hopefully put a nice little ribbon on it.
Yeah, me too. Well, we've missed a few weeks here and there, so
Yep.
anyway, it's all good. So let's dive right in. So one of the chapters in the Bible that talks about parables quite a bit, or that has a couple different parables in it and explains the parables, is Matthew chapter 13. So if you have a Bible and you want to follow along with us, you can go to Matthew 13 and look at verses 10 through 12. And that's where we're going to be hanging out for just a minute and then a few verses after that, too. So let's just get right into it. All right. So the first reason that Jesus uses parables in the Bible states that parables are being used is to reveal truth to those who seek. Alex, you want to read the little short description we have there for that?
Yeah, sounds good. So parables function as a means to convey spiritual truth. Those who generally sought understanding would ponder them and find their meaning, either on their own or with Jesus' explanation. And I'll go ahead and just because it's short, I'll read Matthew 13, 10 to 12. The disciples came to
Yeah.
him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them." Um,
Mm.
yeah, it's I think it's interesting. I didn't think to look this up before, but I wonder how many parables Jesus had been speaking or had given up until the point where the disciples finally decided to ask why he was
Yeah.
telling them parables. I think it was quite a bit because this one this kind of question that they bring to him is kind of pigeonholed between a bunch of parables. It's almost like it
It
kind of
is.
struck them in the middle of it. I find that a little interesting.
And you have some parables where um the explanation of the parable is not given, right? It's just kind of like they're supposed to like think about it.
Hmm.
But then you have some where the parable, the explanation is given publicly, and then you have others where the explanation is sort of given privately.
Yeah.
And so this is like kind of an inside look at the disciples asking Jesus, like, why are you actually doing this? Why is this a part of your ministry? And it's one of those random why questions that the Bible answers for us in this case that you know, a lot of times we don't get. But the answer is interesting because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. I mean, have you ever thought about that? It's pretty crazy.
It's, honestly, it's more it does have a layer of confusion to it almost, the answer itself, because you would think just kind of we all think is that he uses parables as just an interesting way to convey something, which from its core, it's what it is, but he kinda really takes it a deeper level here and says, "No, like, this is stuff that can be revealed to you because, you are, my adopted children, you're, sons and daughters of God," however you wanna phrase it, and, this knowledge can be given to you because it's truth, and it's something that you seek and you can find.
Yeah. Now, something that I think is interesting here because I definitely think there's some truth to like the common idea that, well, like oftentimes when you read a parable, like it clearly is being conveyed in terms that are arguably more understandable, right? Like you know the New Testament has quite a bit of intense theological talk in it, especially when you get to the letters of Paul. And and it's pretty uncontroversial that some of the parables are a little bit easier to understand than some of the hardcore theological teaching. Now, some of them are not, but some of them are. And so, to me, I wonder when it says like the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Specifically, just trying to keep on this point of to reveal truth to those who seek. Um, the Bible says that those who seek after the truth of of Christ, of the mysteries of the kingdom of God, it will be revealed to him. In other words, someone who is genuinely in their heart of hearts open and curious to learn more about the gospel can understand it. And I think maybe you can come in here and tell me what you think of this. I kind of think of this in the same way that um, um, that Paul talks about the natural man not understanding, but the spiritual man who has ears to hear um, can understand reading the scriptures and understanding the Bible. I've always found that interesting because it's not like, I mean, there are some very educated atheists, right? It's not like they can read the scriptures and not know what it means. It's just that they're not able to like internalize it spiritually, whereas someone who's really seeking after truth is able to internalize it spiritually. Does that make sense? I think that's what it's getting at, but is that what the impression that you get?
I think so. I'm gonna kind of say it in maybe different words, and I think we're kind of talking about the same thing. I've kind of had a related thought where, okay, understanding, understanding what something means, like we said, I think anyone can, whether it's the proverbs or going through the parables, can have a general understanding of what it's saying. But I kind of relate it to, and I don't know, I don't know Greek, Hebrew, and all that stuff, and what word is chosen from understanding, but it almost kind of reminds me of when it kind of dawns on you from time to time the relationship you have with Jesus. And it's almost like that something that someone who's not a follower of Christ just doesn't get. Um, Whether it's someone who's hostile to the faith or just they just don't understand it. I think it's kind of similar to that, where you could read a parable and know knowledge wise exactly what it's saying, but it might have a totally different understanding or meaning or feeling to someone who is a believer. And so I think
Mhm.
that there's a little something there too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. In fact, that reminds me, I was telling you earlier that I write for a Christian online magazine, and I was writing an article today on Scientology versus Christianity. You know, what is it, and how does it sort of differ from Christian thought and teaching? And one of the things in my research for writing that I saw was an interview, or at least a clip of an interview of Tom Cruise, who is a very well known Scientologist and very outspoken, and Matt Lauer. I mean, this was back in like the early
Hmm.
2000s. This interview was, and um, um, without getting all into the details, Tom was making a point that is made often in the realm of Scientology that psychiatrists are bunk, right? That like the whole field of psychiatry is basically um, not useful. It's wrong. In some sense, even though this wouldn't be entirely accurate to say, demonic almost. Like it's meant to deceive. And um um Matt kept pressing Tom on these points, and Tom kept saying, "Yeah, but see, it's because you don't understand. You don't have the knowledge of the
Hmm.
true history of psychology, and I of psychiatry, and I do. You don't have that knowledge, and I do have that knowledge. Now, I don't think that's what's happening here, right? I don't think what we're saying is nanny nanny boo boo. We know something you don't know because we can all read the scriptures and know the same thing. I think it has a lot more to do, and I think this would be biblically consistent with um, the heart of a person who is truly open to receiving. If God is real, if Jesus is truly the Savior, etc. If a person is open in their heart to understanding that and receiving that, then somebody who wants that and truly desires that, like it says, whoever has will be given more and they will have an abundance. And this is echoed in various parables and in various places throughout the scripture. And then it says, whoever does not have even what they have will be taken from them. And so again, I almost think about then the opposite thing happening, which seems to be true. Doesn't it seem like the world is descending more and more into chaos? And it seems like almost as a natural consequence of their failure to seek the knowledge of the Lord, they keep descending backwards into more and more just
Mhm.
to use a Christian term, depravity. And then from that, we get just a bunch of weird stuff like people trying to marry their computers or live with cats and paint their faces and get plastic surgery to look like a cat, right? Stuff like that, I think, is just literally a natural outworking of that not having those spiritual eyes and spiritual ears or a desire to have them. And then even what they do have, their sanity, whatever, will be taken from them. I think that's all kind of going on here in this idea of parables.
I think, say it simply, it's like it's all the above there. It's not just parables mean solely this and parables mean solely that, and they're only applicable to life in this way. I think it's all the above, and I think well, you're right. What it comes down to the core issue is a heart issue, and it's kind of cool how something so important like that Jesus decides to use the majority of the time with the parables or all the time stories to convey that. Just kind of shows
Yeah.
how vulnerable, I guess you can say, the heart is to being turned and moved in certain ways based on a story being told. But
Mhm.
yeah, you're right. It comes down
Yeah.
to the heart condition in the end. What one thing
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting is about the understanding is, especially the parables that talk about like prophecy, and we can have like pretty good like guesses as far as whether it's talking about either like the temple destruction, those are pretty clear, whether it was referring to stuff happening in that days or it's time still to come. So there's still even parables that we don't fully understand. But I mean it says here that whoever has even more will be given to you. So I think it's an understanding that will continuously be given. Just kind of something that's funny.
Mhm.
That pops through our mind is we don't necessarily understand everything 100%. Doesn't mean we don't have a certain level of understanding um,
Correct.
and through the
Yeah.
parables.
Yeah, 100%. So I think it's very consistent with like with what we actually see like in
Mhm.
people's lives and our own experience. All right, so let's move to number 2. So with this first one, right? It's more about the positive, revealing truth to those who seek it, and obviously those who are not seeking truth, um, they will actually. I'm just going to use what I'm just going to say the words that I'm thinking because it'll get the point across clearly. They become dumber over time, right? In the sense that they become more spiritually dark over time naturally as a consequence of not seeking out truth. But the second one takes the point to sort of the next level by saying that actually part of the purpose of parables was to conceal truth from the unbelieving and hard-hearted. So this one gets really interesting and I have lots of thoughts, but go ahead and read the description on this one.
Yeah, so parables also function as a form of divine judgment. They conceal truth from those who are hard hearted or refused to believe. Um, I guess I could read the references, the
Yeah,
verses.
go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, you should.
This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing they do not see, though hearing they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become callous. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. What do
Yeah,
you, yeah,
it's juicy.
what are your initial thoughts on that?
So my I'll go back to when I first was studying this because I wrote an article on my blog. Actually, what I was doing is I was writing an article that was simultaneously for the purpose of teaching a class at my former church. And I wrote this article, and I this was the first time that I stumbled across the idea of of parables being a form of divine judgment. Had never thought of them that before. I'm like,
Mm,
wait, aren't these just innocent stories that are, an earthly story to convey a heavenly meaning? Aren't we just telling parables for the purpose of actually clearer understanding? So this was when I was studying this, it was my first exposure. And um I the resources that I came across at that time were Calvinist resources. And so my first initial thought was, oh, this actually is a pretty good proof of Calvinism. That's, of course, I was reading the Calvinist thinkers, and so I was like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, this is interesting. It's like if God does God really want people, some people, not to know, not to understand? So that was my initial thought. I'm curious your initial thought.
My initial thought is a different direction. But I don't think there's a maybe there's a right or wrong. We'll find out. So the thing that I actually we had already kind of established that people, Christian, non-Christian, can read these and understand what they're saying. That the meaning behind it and whatnot, and the story and follow along. I almost think that, again, kind of a little bit of my own little interpretation here. Hearing they do not hear or understand. I don't think it means that they cannot. They obviously can hear physically. They obviously can understand. I think it's a matter of choice. To be honest, it's a matter of them choosing to. The way I kind of the first thing that comes to mind is kind of a laughing disregard for the truth behind them. I think they kind of see it and they know in their mind, but then it's not for them or it's silly. And so the real truth behind it doesn't hit home for them. Does that make sense?
Yep, I totally agree. Um, yes, I agree. I do think though, while I agree, I do think it goes a little bit further. And I'll tell you what unlocked this passage for me a little bit. When I got to, and I'm not sure exactly which verse it is because I don't have the verse numbers. The actual
Mm,
verses being referenced here are Matthew 13 through 15. So I'm not exactly sure which verse this is. It's in the prophecy of Isaiah. When I read the line, "For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears.
mm,
They have closed their eyes." Okay. So again, my initial thought was this is divine judgment. This truth is being concealed from them so that they would not see it, so that they would not understand it. But here's the problem with that interpretation. That's not actually what it says. It says, "For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes." So,
mm.
who closed their eyes and their ears, and who made their hearts calloused?
Yeah, themselves.
They did. They did, right? God did not do that. Okay. This is another thing that, and again, I don't want to say I'm an anti-Calvinist because I love a lot of my Calvinist brothers. I just don't think Calvinism is true. I think there are as many proof texts for Arminianism as there are for Calvinism. And personally, I take a Molinist middle knowledge approach that I think nicely reconciles them both, even though I would infuriate both sides by saying that.
Mm,
Calvinists more so. Um, and so I think Molinism is a middle ground that makes sense of a lot of this stuff. But right, you'll be so right. So then after the logic of their heart has become callous, they hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Okay, then it kind of returns to the idea of the parable. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. And again, my initial thought on that was, oh, so Jesus is telling the parable so that like they would not, so that they would not see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and then I would
mm.
heal them. But I don't think that's what it's saying. Again, that's how I initially read it, and that's how the Calvinist teaching on it was
Yeah.
was trying to lead me. But I don't think that's what it's saying. I think it's just it's actually just making the point that okay, well, their heart's dark. They don't hear with their eyes, or excuse me, yeah, well, of course they don't. They don't hear with their ears, and
I bet
and they've
one of
closed
the
their eyes,
yeah.
so they can't see. And so even if I did tell them the parable, or if I, it's like the parable is a way of simply just reinforcing, like it's because of the nature of how truth is. They are again some of the people who don't have from verses 10 through 12, and so naturally. And again, as this form of divine judgment, they are going to be in a position where, even though this story is being told, that for other people they're being enlightened and it makes so much sense, they're not going to understand it because they don't grasp the truths of the kingdom of God, and in their hearts they're not open to that because they've closed their mind, they've closed their eyes, they've closed off their ears, and so um yeah, I think the logic of the passage, it does not go in that initial sort of direction that I thought. It's still divine judgment, and it is because they're unbelieving and hard-hearted, but it's not God's fault that they're that way. It's their fault that they're that way. And the teaching just reinforces that.
Yeah, I
And
agree. Yeah.
well, I was just gonna say, um, this is also related to how one views Romans 9. So Romans 9, if you're not aware, is a very Calvinist centric passage. They talks a lot about that stuff. It talks about the story of Pharaoh. And of course, the big question can be raised of Pharaoh. Well, who hardened Pharaoh's heart? Did Pharaoh harden his own heart, or did God harden Pharaoh's heart? The answer, according to the Bible, is yes. Pharaoh hardens his heart, God hardens his heart. Pharaoh hardens his heart. God hardens his heart. It kind of goes back and forth. And so it's not this either or thing. It's Pharaoh's heart is being continually hardened because he's hard against God, but Pharaoh hardened his own heart. And so it's sort of the same thing here. Um, that if your heart is dark, if you don't want to see, if you don't want to have your mind open, if you don't want to hear, then you're not going to. And the more teaching that you hear the kingdom of God and the more you shut it off, that is a form of divine judgment because you're unbelieving and hard-hearted. So I think, yeah. I mean, do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that kinda goes, kinda hand in hand with what I was saying is that it's not for a lack of understanding with the mind. Smart people can read this, anyone can read this and realize what it's saying, but it's a matter of a choice whether to recognize it and understand it with your heart or not, and have it be, I guess, really real to you in a sense.
Yep. Correct. Correct. Okay, let's move on to the final one, which is to fulfill prophecy. Take it away, Alex.
Yep, Jesus used a parable, also filled Old Testament prophecies. So Matthew 13:34 to 35, Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So as to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet, I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world.
Yeah, very fascinating. So this is one of those things that Jesus did in fulfillment of uh, prophecy. Now, go ahead. You
No, I
want?
wasn't.
Did
No, I
you want?
wasn't gonna say anything. No, go for it.
Oh, oh, here. I thought you were gonna like come at me with all this enlightened knowledge.
Well, I think.
So,
Well, since you brought it up, I I think it's kind of a it's interesting how he both uses it, yeah, to fulfill the prophecy, but also on the flip side to create new prophecy as well. Um, it's kind of it kind of serves
mm,
two prophetic purposes, fulfilling and then creating as well.
that's very fascinating. Yes, yeah, I agree. And this is so prophecy is interesting. It's confusing. It's really confusing. It's confusing as Gehenna, if you know what I mean. So anyway, the Bible nerds will get that joke. So um, one of the things with prophecy is there are some prophecies that could be fulfilled or that Jesus arguably did fulfill, but they don't have as much sort of evidential weight if you are going to say that, oh, this is a reason to believe the Bible is true or to believe that God is real or whatever you want to, however you want to put that. So, um could Jesus come on the scene to speak in parables and to say, um that so that what was fulfilled, what was fulfilled was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. Could he say that and like not be the son of God? Yeah, right? Couldn't he? I mean, couldn't
Mhm.
he say, "Oh, this is a prophecy that needed to be fulfilled, so I'm gonna go out there and fulfill that prophecy." Okay. Um, that's obviously a very skeptical way to approach this, but I do think that's true. Now, there are some other prophecies, actually, quite a bit of them. The vast majority of them, probably. Um, that are not so clear. In other words, Jesus could obviously raise himself up and go tell prophet and go tell parables and say, "Hey, I'm fulfilling prophecy right here." But obviously, Jesus couldn't necessarily control exactly what others would do to him. And there are a lot of prophecies about Jesus that are concerning things that other people did to him, not that he specifically did in virtue of his own will. And so those are a little bit more powerful for us. However, I would say that for his audience, right, Jesus, his direct ministry was to the Jews. Paul felt it was his
Mm.
ministry to take the gospel to the Gentiles, right? Jesus was ministry was to the Jew first, then to the Greek. And I think this would have been significant for them, especially if they were identifying with things like this was part of his claim to authority. That's what I'm trying to say here. Okay. Again, for Jesus to be saying that he is speaking in fulfillment of the prophet Isaiah, for them, it wasn't so much a matter of, is this true? It was more so a matter of, does this guy know his stuff? Is he the real deal? Like he's claiming this authority, right? The fulfillment of prophecy for them was not proof that the Bible was true or proof that God was real, right? It was part of him claiming divine authority, part of that claim to being the Son of God and being the person who is fulfilling prophecy. So he needed to say this because it made sense in that context, even if it doesn't make the most sense to us. Does that make any sense?
It makes sense, and something, just a little detail that's maybe worth mentioning, I don't know, maybe not, is he didn't just say one parable and then say, "Okay, I fulfilled this prophecy." Like, this is I forget how many
Right.
parables he went in this whole list there, and it was one after another, after another, after another, and then elsewhere too. And then he finally comes, "Okay, like, I just fulfilled this." Wasn't a, kind of
Yeah.
a not get out of jail, but, "Okay, I checked the box," sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, right, and so huge for him to be identifying himself because Isaiah speaks of of a messianic figure, and so this is very clearly Jesus telling the Jews, "I am the Messiah that the Old Testament has been telling you about," and that was a huge
Yep.
claim. I mean, this is part of why he was crucified for making claims like that. Um, Side note, timeout, apologetic side note. It frustrates me to no end when people say that Jesus didn't claim to be God,
Mm,
right? People literally wanted him to say, "I am God." What they don't what they don't realize or seem to, and this might even because they can read it just like I can. So this might even be part of the spiritual blindness and darkness, etc. He said that in much plainer terms than even just saying, "I am God." He literally said, before Abraham was, I am. You
mhm,
don't get a more distinct claim to be God from the mouth of Jesus than that. He is identifying himself with the personal revealed name that God gave to the Hebrew people.
mm.
And again, so this is just another one of those things. Him identifying himself with the messianic figure. In John 10, he identifies himself with the divine council. In other places, he identifies himself as the rider on the clouds that Daniel talks about as being, again, the second Yahweh figure. It's so important to understand these things. Jesus is claiming 100% that he is God, and his use of the parables in this way is that's another a piece of authentication for that, a piece of evidence that he was claiming who he said, um, you know, who he said he was.
That's interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah,
never would have thought that, just looking at the parable aspect.
right. And so we're wrapping up here. But this is one of those things where the Bible is so cool, right? I literally wrote a book about this. Hit me up on Amazon, Steve Schramm, author page. The Bible is not boring. Look up that book, okay? Um, Parables, right? I have to admit, I've always thought parables were a little boring, right? Like
You hear
story,
them once
so
and then
like
you skip
these,
through it.
yeah, exactly. Cute little children's stories. It's not that at all. Like, look at how much depth, like 30 minutes. And honestly, we could go way longer if we had the
Mhm,
time, right? But like 30 minutes just talking about the purpose of parables and how cool and important they are and how they affect what you believe about who Jesus was and the nature of salvation and like how people come to know Jesus and how people despite all the evidence are hard-hearted to believe against him. And yeah, lots there just in the idea of these super simple stories. And I guess just to kind of for a parting salvo here, just reminds me of the gospel itself, how the gospel is so complex and yet so
mhm.
simple. And it's one of the most beautiful and interesting paradoxes in the scriptures.
Yeah, it yeah, the simplicity of everything can be understood by anyone, and yet you have world debates by renowned, like, atheists and Christian scholars debating over the nuances of it. And
Mhm.
even if the side that disavows Christianity as true or the Bible, the fact that they still have to sit and contend with people arguing for it just speaks a lot to how um, yeah, just how complex and scholarly it is. It's a very interesting book.
It's both infinitely simple and infinitely complex, and,
Yep.
very, 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 very beautiful as a result. Well, hey, why don't we move into stories of the week?
Yep. I can go ahead first. Mine's short and simple. So Michael Caine, the actor, for those of you who are not familiar with the name, he played in a lot of Christopher Nolan movies. He played Alfred in the Batman series, and then there's a lot of older ones. I'm actually less familiar with his like main works, I think. But one of my favorite movies with him is, have you ever seen Dirty Rotten Scoundrels?
No, I have not.
Oh, it's so good. With Steve Barton, so those 2 together, and it is great. Anyway,
Nice.
he just announced his retirement, Michael Caine, so I think he's
Really?
92 or something like that,
Wow, took
and,
him long enough, huh?
yeah, I think you said something, like, along the lines of, like, "From here on out, all I'm gonna be doing is playing the old guy." And so I think he just kind of gave up the part, but, I mean, we all get to that
Wow.
point, but it's still a little sad, like, I think it's like a 50 or 60, I think it's 60 years acting career, and, just kind of one of those
Man.
guys where everyone just kinda liked him in movies, he was always, just a
Oh,
solid actor. So,
brilliant, man.
yeah,
He's a brilliant actor. Just
so
so
good.
good.
So, anyway, just a little simple news flash there.
Man, well, alright. So, mine is, the Daily Wire has just announced a new, platform full of kids content called Bent Key, and it is very good. We downloaded it, today. We got on, the Daily Wire Insiders, deal, and I think it was 149 a year, and that's access to all of the Daily Wire Plus content minus the live streams, which I don't care about the live streams. Um,
Yeah.
so it's all of the Daily Wire Plus content minus live streams plus BentKey, which is again their new kids streaming platform, and that by itself is a $99 a year value. That's what you'd pay for it. Um, if you got it by itself. And the kids are loving it. So we downloaded it tonight and have started using it. The content on there is really, really well done from what we're seeing so far. And it held the kids' attention for most of the evening tonight as we were kind of checking it out. And it's really cool to see some conservative voices, or at least some voices that are, yes, there is bias in their political commentary. But the point of Bentkey is not to shove any sort of political agenda on anyone. It's just good, family friendly, lighthearted entertainment with no political bias or whatever. You don't have to worry about random agendas being thrown in there. It's just good, family friendly fun. And really great. So I'm enjoying it so far. I would highly recommend you to go check it out. Just go to bentkey.com, or if you're already a Daily Wire Plus subscriber, you have access to this. You just have to go activate it. So it's good.
Yeah, I was just looking at some of the shows in there. It looks like they got some pretty cool cartoon shows for kids of all ages, even getting up to like 10, 11, 12 years old.
Hmm.
Yeah, it looks pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, they got some really cool looking stuff on there. They got some, so like a good mix of cartoons and live action. One of the things they're doing is bringing back Saturday morning cartoons, right? I mean, like,
Oh
how
my
great is
god.
that? So yeah,
Yeah,
like
Saturday morning cartoons are
that's when
great.
like new stuff is going to release on there. It's like on Saturday morning. They're literally bringing back Saturday morning cartoons, and I'm just like, you know, that and this is not a this is a discussion for probably a different podcast altogether, but I'll just go there real quick. This is what I appreciate about conservatism. Okay, not that I don't like to be progressive in some things. I mean, obviously we need to progress, but I just love the idea of conservatism, of being sure that we don't lose the best parts
Mm,
of the past. You know what I mean? Um I feel like progressivism unfortunately has this idea that change for change's sake is good. And that's not true. At least it's not evidently true to me. It seems like we want to conserve the best of what we have been given, and then we want to move on from the worst of what we've been given. It seems like that's how society should actually progress, and that's what conservatism wants to hold to. It's not against innovation, but it is against losing what is good. And so Bentkey was announced on the 100th year anniversary of Disney launching their
Mm,
company. And of course, Disney, one of Disney's big launches onto the scene was with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And Daily Wire, Bent Key is launching, and they announced their opening salvo as well, being Snow White and the Evil Queen. And so it's kind of like, it feels like a powerful time. It feels like a redo, right? It,
mm,
it, it feels like I told my wife, I said, it's going to take 20 years. So technology, where it is today, and I think it's an entirely different world than when Walt Disney announced his
mm.
company, and so obviously it took many years to get where they were. Um, this is a prediction. I don't know. I give it 20 years. Give it 20 years, and I think that the Daily Wire, Bent Key, and their endeavors, I think they will have successfully created a world that is something like Disney for conservatives, right?
Mm.
Something like that. I think it will. I think it could be that big. Um, yeah, I really do. Because the programming doesn't suck. It's actually entertaining. It's actually good. They hire fantastic people. I mean, like the dad in one of their shows, the Chip Chilla show, the dad is voiced by Rob Schneider, like
Oh, wow,
professional. Like,
yeah. Yep.
yeah, like they are doing it right. They're doing a really good job. So I give it 20 years. I think 20 years they are going to be an absolute force to be reckoned with, and I'm looking forward to going to like Bentkey Land or whatever they end up calling it. I hope my kids get to make memories in a place like that. I made my memories at Disney before it went totally woke, and I still, by the way, I still like go to Disney, and like I have Disney Plus. I'm not like ixnay on the Disney. I mean, some of those stories are just timeless, and it's a big part of my past, and I want to pass the good parts of that to my kids. But I'm excited about a world where I don't have to worry about any kind of woke agenda or other propaganda, and so really fascinating.
I wonder, it'd be interesting. They could probably do some version of this. It would just have to be totally different. It's hard to recreate, but like the magic of Disney that has been there for so long, that's something hard to just make. Even if you do everything well and check all the boxes and create good content. But just like you kind of bring it up, like if they had some type of like bent key world or something, that'd be cool. If that's like they have to build up their story. I think they've done a great job so far, and they have to keep working towards that and create that kind
Yeah.
of magical, just kind of special mark on themselves.
Well, I have to admit, they got a good start. I mean, from what I'm seeing, they've even already got some really good branding around, like they've got a great little musical, like a little. It's
That's
not
good.
not really not really a jingle. Actually, it is kind of a jingle. Um, but like when the app loads up and whatever, it like plays the little tone,
Mm,
and it's
yeah.
already doing some of that world building stuff, and some of their look, you can tell from their look of the app and everything that they like, and their graphic design and everything, they're borrowing a lot from Disney,
Mhm,
and they're doing it right in that sense, right? They know the pieces of it that work. And Jeremy Boring, the co-CEO of Daily Wire, and Ben Key, you know they are talking about adventure and wonder and exploration. Like literally, when you
mm,
buy, when you like, anybody can sign up for a free BentKey account. When you pay, when you become a member, what you're doing is signing up for an adventure pass. Okay,
mm,
right? So lots of branding going on. There's even mystique around the name. Jeremy wears a bent key around his neck. Literally, nobody has any idea what it is. People have asked and looked and whatever, and they don't explain it anywhere. There's all this mystery and wonder around it and a sense of adventure. So yeah, they have a lot of work to do. But honestly, Disney hasn't talked about that stuff for a long time.
mhm,
Right? That's what Walt Disney talked about a lot. I'm a huge Disney nerd, right? So going way back. Walt Disney himself talked about that stuff. But nobody has talked about that stuff for a very long time. It became very profit driven and very politics driven, and it has nothing to do with instilling magical stuff and a sense of wonder and adventure in kids like it used to. And I think anybody who grew up like me and you with that, with hearing that message of adventure and wonder and all of that, that leaves a huge void. And anybody who grew up with it and knows that it's not there in Disney now and is just dying for it, right? Because of that human
mm,
yearning towards story, towards a good story about adventure and wonder and magic and breaking the mold. And that's what they're doing. So I'm excited for it, man.
I forget what the cartoon was that we were watching the day. It was on Disney Plus, and it was one of the older ones. Oh, I think oh my gosh, it was just like today, but there's another one, but no, it was yesterday. Evie put on The Fox and the Hound. And
Ah, yes.
and for like there's always some type of like nostalgia that make you think that things are better than what they were, but like my objective mind took over and I didn't have that sense of like nostalgia or watching as a kid. I was just watching like the art and the sound, the music, and the story development. I was just like, this is like a great movie. Like,
Yeah.
all of those movies, and I'm not saying they don't have any modern ones that are good, but just like that style of art and the amount of time and like each frame just put so much energy into it. It just
Hmm.
an adventurous, wonderful creation. It'd just be great to see
Yep.
more of that. Not necessarily saying
Eh,
you have to stick with that type of art style, but just like that type of feeling.
Yeah, and I like to think that I'm being fairly objective because I do think there are some things. For example, right? I don't know how much you watch these, but me and my wife talk about them all the time. Like I grew up in the era of like Disney Channel original movies and TGIF and um Boy Meets World and like all those things like that, right? And um it's not like kids don't have shows like that today. Now, granted, it is a little different, right? With TGIF, it was an event because remember back in those days, you had to be in front of the TV at a certain
Yeah.
time. So it was like, thank God it's Friday. You were watching that, or like you were watching Nick at Night. And so those are things that I think
Nick
you
at
can't
Night.
get
That
right.
brings back the
Like,
nostalgia. Just thinking about
you see
that.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So so while we can't get that back, like movies like The Genius and Jumpin' Ship and Cadet Kelly, like that was
Mm,
like even at the end of it, but those sort of things, they are nostalgic for me, but I think that's subjective. I think my kids, as they grow older, will look back to the things that they're watching and thinking about now and have some of those same thoughts about theirs. I think
yeah.
that piece of it is subjective. But something going back to like The Fox and the Hound, right? I think that's a great example because it was one of my favorites growing up. But I don't think that wishing for a return to something like that is merely subjective. I think there's something more transcendent
Yeah.
to that, something more objective, just about how that was just a great story and the way that the story was told. It was told in such a story way,
Mhm.
instead of an agenda driven way. It's almost like this is the best way I can think to put it. It's almost like old school Disney and the ideas that Walt himself had, um, were made to penetrate here, made to penetrate your
Yeah.
heart. Whereas now, what they want to do is penetrate your mind. It feels like they're trying to penetrate your mind now with political ideas instead of your heart with a good transcendent story. And those are two different things entirely. And I think undoubtedly and unashamedly, the Daily Wire as a company wants to penetrate your mind with good conservative thinking and a particular bias, a particular way of seeing the world. But with Bent Key, they are actively just trying to prick your heart and
Yeah.
to tell good stories and to instill a sense of wonder and appreciation for where we've come from and where we're going in the future. And that the ability to even articulate that difference and share it widely and then deliver on it is huge.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's the power of it.
It's a big undertaking. I might have to get it just to take a dive into the shows on there.
They're spending $100 million over 3 years on this content. They're
Wow.
very serious about it.
Sounds
So
like,
yeah,
they must be bringing in several shows that probably the majority of them that are not made in-house, at least for now, but are just good shows, and then they have a
that's
few of their
correct.
own. I think that's what you were telling me.
Yep. They have 4 originals right now, and then I think I wanna say there's like 11 or 15 or something like that, others that they have paid a team of people to, like, comb through various libraries and whatever and license, the rights to that are just good family friendly. So, I mean, just imagine somebody actually sitting around, like, taking the time to
Mm,
watch every episode of these shows and then saying, "Yep, this is a show that we can put our stamp of approval on." And I love it because my
mm,
kids are loving it, and it's like I told my wife, like, it's like there was a day when you didn't have to so closely monitor everything, and it's not like I want to be a hands off parent. That's not what I mean, but it's really nice to just have this one thing where I don't have to necessarily go through and approve a show. I
yeah.
just know that when they watch this show, it's going to have good, fun, family friendly
Mhm.
content. And it's not even so I'm a member of Faith Life Connect, which is Logos Bible software, and I get a bunch of stuff with that. One of the things I get with that is their Faith Life TV, okay, which has its own slew of animated stuff and whatever. But again, it is um it's really corny, right? It's just that
Yeah,
corny,
that ruins it
it's that
so much.
it's that corny Christian content, and honestly, and I at my kids' ages, some of it they're okay with, like, they love Bible Agent 7, like, it's honestly the coolest one, but
Mhm.
it's so stinking corny, and this is not corny. This is the level of quality that you
Mhm.
want, while at the same time being family friendly and just helping them to think big, and yeah, it's powerful stuff, so highly recommend Ben Key. I wish I had an affiliate link. I've sold it pretty hard here. I'd love to get a kickback on this, but no kickback. This is totally for free. You should go join. 99 bucks. It's probably the best 99 bucks you'll spend all year. It's really good.
Awesome.
I'd
Good
pay
stuff.
99 bucks just to have Saturday cartoons back. So
I forget if I wanna say it was before school and then ended up moving to Saturdays. My big one, around, like, 10 or 11 was Yu-Gi-Oh! I loved following that show. Oh
I
my gosh.
loved Yu-Gi-Oh!
It was
Huge Yu-Gi-Oh
so
fan
good.
here.
It was so good.
Mm.
The
Yep,
battles
I
were
loved me some Blue
great.
Eyes White Dragon and some Red Eyes Black
Yes.
Dragon and some Time Wizard. The Time Wizard with the little mustache and the clock and the hat. He was my favorite. Man,
That show had it.
I had a reflective Time Wizard card, and I just
Loved
loved
it.
that thing. I
Do
still have all
you
my cards.
do you remember how that show ended? I still remember it because it blew my mind. Like, the story was so good. So remember how
Well,
and
it's
I
still
forget
continuing on. Like, are you
I
talking about
it
like the
probably is,
original? Like, I
but
guess the first season of it or whatever?
no, like, and I'm sure it continues on, but there was at one point, like, it was, like, a big deal. It was, like
Okay.
Yu-Gi-Oh's final, like, journey thing or whatever, and I kept watching it, waiting for the end, and I forget the names 'cause it's been so long, but remember he'd switch between, like, Yugi and he like, himself and then, like, the adult version of himself. I forget
Yeah,
exactly how it played out,
yeah.
and he was fighting
I
against the
forgot
real
about
bad
that.
guy with the eye that could, like, literally, like, read his mind or something, and so the way he figured out on beating him was he would switch between himself so that he wouldn't even know his own cards. And therefore, his opponent with the gold eye or whatever couldn't read his mind and see what he had, and that's how he ended up beating him. And I just like it was so cool.
I remember that. I think I remember that. Now I'm gonna have to go back and how do I watch Yu-Gi-Oh?
I
Like,
think the last time I checked, this was several years ago, but I thought they were free on YouTube. I really thought they
that's what I
were.
was just getting ready to check.
Yeah, I th-
Like Yu-Gi-Oh
that was a
original,
long
right?
time
Like,
ago. I think you just look up Yu-Gi-Oh like episode like season one, episode one. I'm pretty sure it was up there unless it got taken
I think
down.
so. Official Yu-Gi-Oh, yeah. Like, there's full playlist. Like Yu-Gi-Oh season 0. Um,
Yep,
man, isn't that interesting?
awesome
Wow,
stuff.
dad gum. That
Anywho.
doesn't look. Maybe that's not what I Yu-Gi-Oh. Anyway, okay. Well, it's
Had
time to
fun.
end the podcast, right? And that's what we do
Yeah.
now, I think. Yes,
And
we
so,
end.
yes, and so the next podcast we have, we'll probably have a couple, at least 1, maybe 2 movie reviews that we'll do, and then we'll have to come up with
Yeah,
another mini series or at least some type of, like, similarly related topics and kinda go over some stuff, or I don't know, maybe we do a few offshoot episodes, but we'll have to put our minds
yeah,
together and,
yeah.
come up with something.
I'm excited. I'm excited for it, man. I'm excited. So good times. It's a good time to be a listener of the Story World podcast. If you're not a listener to the Story World podcast, you're not hearing what I'm saying, but you should be hearing what I'm saying. Like why aren't you a listener? That's the dumbest thing ever. You should totally check out the best podcast on the internet, Story World with Steve and your boy Al. All right, that's all for now. Hide your kids, hide your wife, tell your friends, share, like, comment, all the little things. Hit the bell if you're on YouTube. That's all I got.
Hit the bell, ring the bell, do whatever you need to do.
Peace out.
See ya.